Good afternoon. I'm with Bob Moriarty, founder and chief editor of 321gold.com. Bob is a veteran of the gold mining sector, the junior mining sector, and a prolific commentator on global affairs. Bob, how are you doing?
Good. It's been an interesting week, and the next 10 days are going to be more interesting.
It's going to be more interesting because of the US election or
Yes,
something else?
yes, yes.
Yeah. I voted on Wednesday. I voted here in Broward County, Florida. The line was almost 2 hours long, which was unusual for early voting.
Strange enough, and you just raised an interesting point. Now, that's significant, but I can't tell you who it is significant for. But that's an interesting comment.
You know, the early turnout seems to be more Republican heavy. The registered voter turnout, like in Dade County, the Republicans are turning out big. Broward is more of a Democrat county. Like Fort Lauderdale is pretty liberal as far as Florida goes. It's pretty liberal. So I don't expect Trump to win Broward County, but I do expect him to win the state of Florida. And I think everybody expects him to win the state of Florida. But as we know, the real swing states are Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Arizona, and those are a lot closer. So, what do you think is going to be so interesting about the election outcome?
Okay, I need to ask a question. Let's pretend the Democrats don't manage to steal it, which they have been trying to do, and Donald Trump is actually elected. Uh, the Electoral College votes, and then on January 6th, the results are certified. Who certifies the results?
The vice president.
Thank you.
Yeah, we had this last time. I mean, this is a favorite talking point of conspiracy theorists and doomsday folks. But I mean, Pence certified Biden. Harris has a constitutional duty to certify the winner of the election. And it would be unprecedented. And frankly, if she didn't certify it, then somebody else would. I mean, it's just her role is ceremonial in nature.
That while that's true, we have Democratic congressmen calling for her to not certify them. I believe, and I think 25% of Americans agree, we're very close to a civil war. And I'm not saying that's going to happen. I just see some really scary things. I have never seen an election as dangerous as this. The rhetoric is absolutely amazing. I don't like Trump, but to the extent to call him a fascist and say he's going to destroy democracy, it's very funny that Kamala Harris is saying that, who never received a vote for as presidential candidate. We're just doing things this year that have never been done before. So there's no predicting what's going to happen other than I personally think something bad's going to happen before the election. And there's a good chance it'll be in the Middle East or it'll be in Ukraine.
It's interesting because I'm a student of markets. I read like you do. I think you probably read a little more than I do, especially about the macro. I tend to tune a lot of it out because I tend to think, just based upon my experience, it doesn't add a lot of value to my investing and market analysis process. I find that like this stuff between Iran and Israel is, well, first of all, it's very scary. It's very doomsday like, but it's been happening now for 5 months. It's been happening since May, and a lot of unprecedented attacks. I mean, the fact that these two countries have fired, missiles in large quantities, dozens and dozens at each other, and it is what it is. The market keeps going up, the stock market keeps going up, gold keeps going up, price of Bitcoin keeps going up, right? So there's, in my mind, the monetary policy and the sovereign debt situation of the world and what China's doing in terms of their stimulus is way more important for markets than whatever is happening in Ukraine or Iran right now. Although those are two big hotspots, it doesn't seem to me that the market cares.
Let me interject this, because you raised a really good point. If we were on the verge of World War III and the markets believed that, you would certainly see moves in oil, which were not seen, and you would probably see moves in gold and silver related to the geopolitics, and we're not seeing that. The market is saying everything's perfectly normal. So it's hard to separate the rhetoric from the actual events. The markets are not saying World War III is around the corner. However, what Iran is saying and what Israel is saying is very inflammatory. And there's a lot of things. One of the things I find interesting is how deceitful the mainstream media is. Someone sent me a link, and Putin actually talked to both Israel and Iran and said he would guarantee the security of both countries. And of course, there wasn't a single word about that in the mainstream media.
I don't know how he can, secure the security of both countries. I think he's talking above his pay grade, and so I think that's why they ignored it. I think, I think that the Israelis have more than enough capability to land a fatal blow to Iran, but it's not in their interest
I'm going to
to
tell
do
you,
so.
you're absolutely incorrect. Okay, if you take both attacks, now understand, I spent 20 months of my life in Vietnam, and I spent 7 months of my life planning attacks to the tune of hundreds of airstrikes, hundreds of artillery missions, dozens of naval gunfire missions. The attacks by Iran on Israel were exceptionally well executed and exceptionally effective. And the attacks by Israel on Iran were absolutely meaningless. Some of the things that everybody's ignoring is that Iran's reaction is perfectly legal from a international law perspective, and the attacks were effective. And you can actually go to YouTube and you could see the last attack that Israel said most of the missiles were shot down, but you could see 30 explosions on one of the Air Force bases. From a tactical point of view, Israel is exceptionally easy to attack because it's so small, and Iran is very difficult to attack because it's so large. Iran has 74 times the physical size of Israel,
Yeah,
and it has 10 times the population. So the media, which is exceptionally biased towards Israel, is not telling the truth. And should there be a conflict, Israel is going to be the loser and perhaps destroyed. If you look at Mearsheimer, if you look at Scott Ritter, these guys recognize what's happening, and they're saying Israel's being exceptionally foolish. The United States is sending aircraft to somebody, probably to the Middle East, and it could be especially destructive to the United States too. So you're incorrect saying that Israel is going to be the victor. Israel cannot be the victor, and they need to be very careful. Israel right
Well,
now has turned into a cult of religious fanatics. And if you look at what's happening in Gaza, and you look at what's happening in the West Bank, and if you look at what's happening in Lebanon, it's absolutely sickening. That is not warfare. That is a massacre of innocent women and children, and it's evil. It's absolutely dead wrong.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, and we're going down this rabbit hole again. I think my point was correct, and it stands as true that the Israeli armed forces could land a fatal blow to Iran with nuclear
How?
weapons, Um, and let me make my point here. I think that what Iran did in the recent counterstrike was a very clever move, and you're correct. I think 20 of those, missiles did get through, maybe 20 to 30. So they showed that, the Israeli shield is not perfect, it's not flawless, and it can be penetrated. And they made a point there. But it's also interesting that, Iran fires over 100 missiles. 70 of them or so get shot down or don't, make it to their target. Between 20 and 30 do get through and do hit the ground and do make impacts, including, at the Air Force base, in the desert, but they don't kill anybody. They miss, their objective targets. So, if this was a war, if this was an actual all-out war, that counterstrike would be a joke, Bob. It would be a joke. I mean, when you're in Vietnam and you're hold on,
No, no, hang on.
and you're planning an
Wait
airstrike,
a minute.
and
Wait a
you
minute.
don't.
Wait a minute. How much time have you got in combat? Because you're talking bullshit. Okay. The attack was incredibly effective, and the very funny thing is
It didn't
the
hit any
fact that
targets.
they didn't kill anybody because they weren't trying to kill people. The idea in war that killing people is how you win is bullshit. Okay, we
Okay,
killed 2
so when
million Vietnamese and we lost the war. The funny thing is, they put 30 missiles on one Air Force base. Now, there's no way you can construe that as not effective. They totally bypassed the entire Israel and American defenses. That was incredibly effective.
Okay, I mean, Bob, I'm not going to get personal, and I'm not going to say nasty things about you like you just did to me. Okay, that I'm talking bullshit. I'm not talking bullshit. I'm stating my opinion, and I'm a free person. I'm allowed to state my opinion the same way you are. So I would ask that you apologize for saying that,
No,
about me.
here's
And
the deal,
no, no,
Robert.
no, hold on. You listen to me for a second. In
Okay,
Vietnam, when the US Air Force went out, they weren't making airstrikes on grass to prove a point or to scare people. They were bombing people with napalm, right? I mean, so war is
actually,
ugly.
not the Air Force,
What?
not the Air Force.
So then, who was doing it?
They had B-52s, and they were dropping for 35,000 feet, and they dropped 115 700-pound bombs. They were hitting. I'm going to try to describe this. The targets that we hit in South Vietnam were soft targets. Okay, there were a bunch of individuals out in the jungle. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
the targets in North Vietnam, the B-52s were hitting with 500 and 750-pound bombs, were semi-hard targets. They're not buildings like Gaza or Beirut. Those are actually very hard targets. They were semi-hard targets, but we were targeting bridges, we were targeting oil refineries, etc. But here's the key. It's okay to have an opinion, but an educated opinion, an experienced opinion, overrides an opinion.
Okay, I mean, and I respect your experience in Vietnam, and I do, understand that you understand that conflict, on another level than I do. But I think this situation, it's 2024, it's not 1969,
That
and
I've heard that argument, but it's nonsense.
okay,
War is war. If you
war
fire
is war,
50
and you've
missiles
told me
at
before that nobody wins in war.
that,
So, Iran didn't win with the counterstrike, and neither, did the Israelis by, what they've done in Gaza and in Lebanon. Like nobody's winning here, right? Like nobody is winning. But the whole thing kicked off, when you said that Putin guaranteed them safety, which I think
no,
is
he guaranteed the security
the
of both
security.
countries.
So what does that
And
mean?
that's an important concept. Okay. Putin told Israel, we will stop Iran from attacking you. And Putin told Iran, we will stop Israel from attacking you. And that is the definition of a peacemaker, not
And
a
how does he do that?
warmonger.
And
Pardon?
how does he do and how does he do that?
Well, let's take one of your statements that Israel could destroy Iran if they use nuclear
So
weapons.
Russia's going to use a nuclear weapon? That's his
Both
promise?
Russia, both Russia and China have stated publicly, that if Israel attacks Iran, they will defend Iran. Now, please don't try to convince me that Israel can take on Iran, Russia, and China all at the same time,
No,
because I'm
I'm sure
afraid
they
it's
can't.
not
I'm sure
possible.
they can't. I'm sure they can't. But what you're doing by invoking Putin's promise or offer, whatever the hell it is you're saying that okay, it's great because if this escalates, it's going to be nuclear war.
No, I
And
didn't say that. I said he's trying to de-escalate the potential
but
for going nuclear, and
But if
certainly,
Israel attacks Iran, then Russia's going to jump into the fray and and attack Israel, which means that the
right.
U.S. will defend Israel, and we have World War III. So what you're doing is you're saying it's great that Vladimir Putin is offering to start World War III.
No, that Vladimir Putin is trying to end the conflict, and the United States and Israel are trying to expand the conflict. And I found it very interesting that the news media had nothing to say about a major power offering to guarantee Israel's security and guarantee
And don't you
Iran's
find? I mean,
security.
we could go on this for hours because we don't agree. We've already, we've agreed that we don't agree on these issues. But it's really ironic that Russia, the leader of Russia, who murders people and imprisons people for speaking publicly and freely, and also invaded a neighboring sovereign state, is now saying, "Well, I'm a peacemaker," whereas he's murdering and raping and bombing, women and children in Ukraine. It's absurd. It's the same thing where
And
like George
now,
W. Bush
I have never
is
heard,
going to bomb Iraq, and then he's a
I
peacemaker
have
too.
not heard a single word about Putin raping anybody or the Russian troops raping anybody. And in fact, they have been targeting legitimate military targets, and there has been very little civilian damage done to Ukraine. Okay, the amazing thing,
Bob,
it's
you're in
very
France.
specifically
You're
targeted.
you're in France. You're not on the ground in Ukraine. So,
I don't
like
have
you
to
took
be
a
on the
shot at
ground.
me. No, you took a shot at me because you're a war veteran. Well, I'm gonna take a shot at you. You're talking bullshit. You don't know Ukraine. You're not on the ground there. You're not fighting this conflict. You don't know who's died. You don't know people that have had family members die there, that were bombed uh, by Russian warplanes and cruise missiles. I mean, it's absurd. Okay, it's absurd. I just I don't I don't want to go any more with this.
Okay, we can agree to disagree. However, it's something I have a background in and you do not. You can
I
have
mean,
all the
I
opinions you
I
want
don't
to.
think your Vietnam War experience applies to present day in Ukraine, Bob. I mean, it's
Of course it
2024.
does.
How, well, I mean, how does it apply?
Okay, the job that I did was as a forward air controller, and I picked targets. Now, the amazing thing is, they have replaced me with $1,000 drones. And of
Hmm.
course, both sides are using drones. This has been an incredible war that nobody's talking about because they've got these brand new, really cheap, but really effective weapons. And I will say, I'll go back to Iran for just a minute. For them to launch hundreds of suicide drones, it's absolutely remarkable. In the first attack, if you go back to April, I have seen what I believe to be credible reports that said the attack cost Iran $100 million, and it cost France, the UK, the United States, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Israel $5 billion. Okay. Now, wars at their heart eventually become economic in nature. And if it costs you 50 times as much to defend as it costs the attacker automatically has won.
Yeah, and I think that's a point. I mean, the US is burning through billions of dollars a day by having two or three aircraft carriers floating around the world, carrier battle groups with, with all the support vessels, all of the troops we have stationed around the world. I mean, it's billions of dollars a day for this enterprise, and the Houthis or the Iranians are able to do a drone onslaught or fire a few missiles at some ships, and it costs us another $100 million to shoot them down. So I mean, it is pretty absurd.
Thank you. Extremely effective argument on your point. Let's take that back. The Houthis are wearing sandals and turbans. Okay, they're as primitive. It's not even country. Those are the rebels in Yemen. It's not the Yemen government, and their attacks have been incredibly effective against Israel. The nature of war has changed, but the fact that what I did in a bird dog is now done with a $1,000 drone doesn't change who wins and who loses. I'm dead sense. You're talking about women and children and people being raped in Ukraine. I'm concerned with the million dead Ukrainian soldiers, okay, which I find an incredible crime, but it's a crime on Ukraine. It's not a crime on Russia.
Well, what about the Russian soldiers who are dying on Ukrainian soil, the soil that's not theirs? The same way that when American troops were sent to Iraq in 2003, 5,000 of them died on soil that's not theirs, fighting for a cause that wasn't theirs either, right? So, I mean, I
Right.
think we can put a bow tie on this and say, I vote for ending all wars. If there's a way I could vote for that and have it happen, I'd do it right now. And I think that, you would as well. Unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be a possibility. Uh, I'll ask you one final question on this topic, and then we can move on to precious metals. Um,
Okay.
do you think if Trump wins in 10 days, in 11 days, that one of his key objectives next year will be to end the wars?
I don't think so. I think that's rhetoric. I think he's trying to get elected. I don't find substance in Donald Trump, and his total absolute support of Israel, I think, is a giant mistake. The Middle East is a mess because the United States supports Israel. If Israel had to defend itself, it would become a good neighbor. But using the United States as big brother to bail us out, I think is a giant mistake on the part of Israel and of the United States. I don't want to see American kids killed in Israel, and there are troops there now, but there's American troops in Ukraine as well.
Okay. Yeah, it's a long topic and we can go down that rabbit hole. I respect your opinions, and also I also realize that sometimes, I get agitated with something that you're saying, and I realize, hey, why is it bothering me so much? If it's really not true, then why is it bothering me so much, right? And I hope that, you can feel the same way about some of my opinions, and they're valid. They may not all be right or true, the same way that yours might not be all right or true. I think there's a lot of gray area in this world today, and I think that we do have common ground, that we would both end the wars right now, if we could. Let's move on to a topic.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would support anyone, and this would certainly include China, and it would certainly include Russia, any effort whatsoever to end the war in Ukraine, or any effort whatsoever to end the war in the Middle East, I would support 100%.
Okay, agreed. Let's move on to precious metals. So gold and silver have had a tremendous last month or
Okay,
so, I think.
hang on,
Yeah.
hang on just a minute. You just said something that was really important, and before I lose the track of it, you were talking about how much money it costs the United States. We should talk about I think it's 500 billion or 600 billion in US spending in the last 3 weeks. Are
Well, I
you
mean,
familiar with what I'm talking about? I mean,
yeah.
I've just seen a report. Uh, I've seen reports in the past where there was $1 trillion in spending in 3 months, and just in the last couple of days, they're talking about 500 or 600 billion in 3 weeks.
Well, that would be unprecedented. Like I know in August, the deficit was 389 billion for the month of August. So if you extrapolate that to an annual rate, that's over 4 trillion a year. I mean, that's obviously unsustainable. That's incredibly, egregious. 600 billion in 3 weeks would be would be would be another level of shocking. I haven't seen that report, but once again, this year's deficit was projected to be, I believe, 1.7 trillion at the start of the year. Well, once again, we're running above the forecast. It's going to be over 2 trillion in 2024. And I don't think
Well,
either candidate is going to change that.
they're going to. Absolutely.
Oh, they're going to run a bigger one.
They're going to run a bigger one. Okay. We are not run by anybody who can add and subtract. Kamala Harris came out and she wants to put on wage and price controls, and she used grocery stores as an example of companies that were gouging customers. Most people have forgotten this. I was there. I listened to it. It's something I'm familiar. But if you go back to August 15th of 1971, Nixon's speech was not about gold. Nixon's speech was about wage and price controls. And wage and price controls have failed every single time they have been used. And that's Kamala Harris's platform, is to put on wage and price controls. And frankly, I won't go into the specifics of Donald Trump, but his cutting taxes and increasing spending would increase deficit. We're being pushed to the edge of a cliff. And of course, now we can talk about gold and silver, because certainly the financial aspects of the United States and the world in general are suggesting gold and silver are going to go a lot higher, as in much, much, much higher.
We've been speaking since 2015. It's been a decade, by the way. I think that this might even be our 10th anniversary conversation. And I recall somewhere around 2016, 2017, 2018, you started talking about this debt, Jubilee. We're going to have a Jubilee where all the debt has to be canceled and a new money, system starts again. And the first time you told me that, I said, that's not going to happen. It might happen in 50 years. It might be after we're both dead. It's not going to happen anytime soon. And as the years have passed, Bob, it's becoming closer and closer to a reality. Are we going to have a debt jubilee?
We have to. The debt cannot be paid. You can go back to about 2010, and I think it was the University of Massachusetts or the University of Boston. Someone did a report, and it showed that the actual unfunded liabilities of the United States over the next 50 years was something like 210 trillion. So the debt cannot be paid. The debt is accelerating. I'll ask you a question and you can educate me. And if you got an answer for this, I'm going to congratulate you. Where the fuck is all the money being spent? What are these guys spending the money on? I read constantly. I go through hundreds of articles a day, and I don't know how they're blowing through so much money.
A lot of government jobs, a lot of expansion of government. They expanded the IRS. They expanded all different kinds of government agencies. The Department of Homeland, Security, which are not protecting our border, but they do check our passports at the airports. Just lots of waste. And you got to remember, Bob, government is more bloated and a bigger mess than the largest corporations are, right? The corporations are super efficient, in comparison to government. So when we have this inflationary spike since 2021, where the prices of everything go up 30 to 40% across the economy, well, the cost of government goes up 30 to 40% too. All the employees get raises. The cost of all the government spending, like, everything the government purchases for the, military goes up 30 to 40% too. So that's why. And then don't forget about the interest expense on the treasury debt. So that's now running at $1.2 trillion a year. Just the interest, just paying the service payments on the credit card that the government has is 1.2 trillion a year. So add it all up, it's mind-boggling, right? It's like if a private individual was in a situation like the US government is in, they would have declared bankruptcy 10 years ago. But because it's the government, they can't.
Well, interestingly enough, there are only two U.S. departments that spend more money than the interest. You know which ones?
Pentagon?
No, that surprised even me. Social Security and Medicare.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, and that's only going to get worse, right? So,
absolutely.
we think it's bad now. Oh boy, you ain't seen nothing yet. You ain't seen nothing yet in terms of the unfunded liabilities and Medicare and Medicaid. Those costs are going to go up a lot in the next decade, a lot. So we all agree there's no solution to this. There has to be a debt restructuring. How does it happen?
I don't know. I just know that it's going to. Strange enough, and this gives us kind of a lead into BRICS. I think the BRICS meeting was really important, and I was hoping for some kind of agreement on what the BRICS financial solution is, and they really didn't come up with it. It was a meet and greet, and they talked about opening commodities exchanges, which who cares? But I didn't see very much discussion about a BRICS currency, even though they were passing out BRICS bills. They were pieces of paper, and they were pretty pieces of paper, but they were meaningless pieces of paper.
And they're going to stay meaningless, Bob. They're going to stay meaningless.
Yeah, I think there's a good chance that's true. They have not come up with solutions, so you can't say that's going to work and you can't say it's not going to work. They need to do something, but they haven't done it yet. And I was kind of disappointed in the BRICS meeting to the effect that you've got dozens of countries that recognize the stranglehold the United States has on the rest of the world geopolitically is a negative for the rest of the world. And they all agree that needs change, but nobody's talked about how it's going to, some of the stuff, how the United States solves the debt problem is utterly beyond me. I think it'll go into hyperinflation. I don't think there's any choice. And eventually there will be a debt jubilee. So I'm going to be absolutely correct about the debt jubilee. I'm just going to be a little late.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the BRICS currency is an interesting one because we have a microcosm of what that could look like in the Eurozone. How well is the Eurozone functioning, Bob? In your estimation, and these are a group of countries that border each other. A lot of the BRICS countries do not border each other. They speak very different languages, have very different cultures. Most of Western Europe is pretty similar culturally, although not identical for sure. But they have similar values, similar government structures. How's the Eurozone functioning?
I think it's dysfunctional. The idea that you've got a bunch of unelected bureaucrats in Brussels who override national sovereignty, I think is patently absurd. I think the end result of Ukraine will be the destruction of NATO and perhaps the destruction of the EU. We are seeing various different countries, including France, including Spain, including, I think, Germany or Austria and Poland, are starting to put up barriers to immigration because they recognize what the unlimited migration into Europe, what an utter disaster it's been. And I think people in the United States are starting to recognize it. When you've got a situation like Springfield, Ohio, where the United States has flown in, okay, these guys didn't walk up from Nicaragua or Costa Rica. The Haitians were flown into the United States without any discussion whatsoever. And they're eating dogs and cats, and everybody's made fun of Donald Trump. That's actually true. It's part of the Haitian culture. And I'm not saying everybody's eating dogs for lunch every day. However, there's a lot of dogs and cats who have gone missing in Springfield. And unfortunately, it's taken a lot of American jobs with them. So Europe is dysfunctional, but the United States is more dysfunctional. And nobody has figured out yet that these 13 million illegal immigrants cost a lot of money.
Yeah, that's the cover of the New York Post today. Free lunch, the country of the free lunch, 150 billion to deal with the illegal immigrants in the country. And that 150 billion has been spent on the illegal immigrants, has meant that social services have been cut, paramedics have been cut, law enforcement has been cut. So the services that we count on, that our taxes pay for, we're not getting because of illegal immigrants. So just think about that, like, you're being robbed or you're in a car accident and need, an ambulance. Well, it's going to come 30 minutes later because there's fewer of them because we've let in millions of illegals, right? So that's pretty absurd, and that's a big hot button issue in this election. I do want to talk about sentiment on gold, Bob. So we're at 2754 right now. You're an astute observer of market sentiment, of gold market sentiment. What's your gauge on where we're at in terms of sentiment on gold here?
Okay, I'm glad you gave me credit there because I think I spend more time talking about it. Now, whether I know more about it is a totally different issue. Let's go back to January 21st, 1980. The sentiment on silver was, I'm pretty sure, 95. That's the daily sentiment indicator, ranges from 0 to 100. 0 means everybody's negative on it. 100 means everybody's positive on it. If you go back to April 25th of 2011, sentiment on silver got to 96. It was actually higher in 2011. Now, the price of silver was right at $50 or just short of $50 an ounce. But $50 an ounce in 2011 is not the same as $50 an ounce in 1980. Okay, if you go back 31 years, the value of the dollar changed dramatically. So the all-time high in silver was in 1980, and even in 2011, it wasn't that high in relative terms, and it's substantially lower now. But the daily sentiment I looked up before we started talking was 75 for gold, 74 for silver. The highest it's gotten in the past few months is 88 for gold and 88 for silver. And that is not a deal killer. That is not a top. That is not the end of the move. And it's actually with gold and silver at 74 and 75, and gold nibbling at an all-time high, it's actually very low. Okay, I would have thought it would have been in the 90s, and it's not. The ETFs have been selling gold all along, which I find interesting. So China, Russia, and the central banks appear to be purchasing a lot of gold. The ETFs are selling. The sentiment for juniors still really sucks. Okay, some of the juniors are starting to move, but you would think that the juniors would be 3 or 4 times higher, and they're not. Now, I believe that they will. You've done some really good work on Newmont. Newmont's gotten creamed in the last couple of days because of some poor numbers. So we're in an interesting situation. My opinion, for what it's worth, is we're going to have 5 to 10 years at least of a bull market. And when the dollar changes its value dramatically, it's going to drive gold and silver much higher. But of course, the problem is you don't want to live in a world with $50,000 gold.
Yeah, I mean, I think previously I said I don't want to live in a world with $5,000 gold. I think I was joking. I think it's more of a realistic possibility that $5,000 gold doesn't mean, you know, a catastrophe, but 50,000 I think would definitely mean a catastrophe. It would mean hyperinflation. It's good you brought up silver, 1980, 2011. So those are two major reference points in the last 50 years for the precious metal market. In 1980, obviously we had Soviet Union, you know, invaded Afghanistan at the end of 1979. We had 20% inflation, you know, in the US. We had an oil crisis. We had a hostage crisis, you know, in Iran. There was a lot of shit going on in January 1980, but that proved to be a major top for both gold and silver. And sentiment was off the walls in January 1980. I mean, I was a baby when my father told me that January 1980, he went to the dentist. He was getting his teeth cleaned or a cavity filled or something, and his dentist was late for the appointment because he was talking to his futures broker, putting in a trade to buy gold futures in January 1980. So the dentists in New York City were buying the top of the gold market. That was a classic market top. And then April, May 2011, silver went ape shit, went to 49.82. There was a lot going on there too. The dollar was falling pretty quickly in 2011. There were a few other things going on, but that was also a major blow off sentiment top.
Yeah, well, Eric Sprott was pimping silver.
Eric Sprott was, yeah. But, you know, look at the quarterly chart. I'm glad you brought that up because I pulled up the quarterly chart right now. I'm staring at it. Silver right now is probably closer to maybe January 2011 than May 2011, if that's even a good analog, but we're not there yet. The breakout has just started and the sentiment is not euphoric yet. Now, that could change in November, January 2025. Who knows? We might get to $50 and everybody will want to own silver. It'll be another top. But right now, we're not there yet. I don't know the future and you don't know the future. I don't have a crystal ball. But one more sentiment point. I was at a conference in Fort Lauderdale Monday and Tuesday, right on the beach, beautiful 5-star hotel, some great mining investors, some of the best CEOs in the sector are there. They have a gold panel. They have a bunch of other panels. The gold panel, 2 out of 3 seats in the room are empty. So here you got some of the smartest guys in the business talking about the market, the gold market, gold mining, the potential for more takeovers to happen in 2025. Some really smart points being made, with a lot of deep insights, and it's empty. It's empty, and we've got gold at all-time highs, silver $34 an ounce. Nobody cares. Nobody
Yeah,
cares.
but
So,
there's a reason for it.
why is that?
Okay, if you went to a gold conference last year, 5 years ago, what was the average age?
67?
Yeah, or higher.
Yeah,
Okay.
right. Yeah.
No, I mean, the interesting thing is that we have to get young people into the market, and we have not done that yet. And the fact is that nobody's going to the gold show because they all died of old age.
It's interesting. That's a good point. But I'll tell you, I mean, I'm 45. I have some friends in their 30s. I don't really hang out with the 20-something crowd. I'm a little too old for that. But I have some friends in their 30s, and you could call them young. And a couple of them have just started this year making some investments in physical gold and silver, small investments, a very small portion of their income, but $1,000 purchases, $2,000 purchases, but they're putting a little bit of their savings into gold and silver. This never happened previously. This never happened 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Nobody I knew, aside from people who are hardcore gold bugs, owned any physical gold and silver. So it's changing, but it's changing slowly.
And we can clearly see the direction that it's going to go to. Another point that I would like to elaborate on, you talked about the majors and doing takeovers. There has to be, absolutely has to be. If you go back to the time of BRICS, the majors had big exploration departments, and all those guys got fired after BRICS. Okay, so since 2000, all of the exploration has been in juniors. So there has to be a lot more M&A activity.
There has to be. There has to be. And we saw some interesting activity today with a big gold producer, AEM, made a $40 million investment in ATEX, which is a copper gold porphyry company in Chile. Unusual for a gold producer, AEM, to go into copper. Like, it's more of a copper play than a gold play, because that's the way porphyries are. Yeah, they got gold, but most of the economic value of the metalling ground comes from copper. That's just how the porphyries work. Copper first, and then sometimes gold second, and moly third. So that was interesting. But I think we're going to see that more and more, that big companies like Barrick, like Newmont, like AEM, are going to invest in copper and gold deposits. And it's happening. It's happening. It's happening slowly. These companies don't move fast. You brought up the Newmont earnings. I think we've seen that in the numbers from Newmont in the last year since their acquisition of Newcrest. They're slow. These are big, bloated companies across multiple continents. And for them to achieve the synergies from this kind of combination of two large organizations is going to take years. It doesn't happen in 6 months or 12 months. and Newmont's showing some serious growing pains. But even with the bad numbers and the cost rising, this is a company that still generated almost $1 billion in free cash flow in 3 months, right? That's due to the gold price largely. Well, the gold price in Q3 was 2,500. It's 2,750 right now. So what's possible for Newmont in Q4 and into 2025? I don't know. We'll see. Before we wrap up, Bob, this has been a fantastic conversation. It started a little rocky. Maybe it'll be, very entertaining for the audience to see that. But I want to ask you about Sitka, because you were pounding the table in Sitka back in August and September, trying to get me to buy it and follow it. I did a little bit, a little late, but they just put out an incredible drill intercept last week, 678 meters of 1.04 grams per ton gold, not gold equivalent, gold from surface, including 93 meters of 2.57 grams per ton gold in the Yukon. What do you think about those results? And are you still a buyer of Sitka?
Well, interestingly enough, and you're the perfect guy to ask that question because you were really familiar with Banyan. Okay. Now, I happen to know Tara Christie. I love her. I think she's wonderful. But in that area in the Yukon, you've got Victoria Gold, you've got Banyan, you've got Snowline, you've got Sitka, and they're all similar deposits. Sitka had the advantage of their particular RC deposit, and now Clear Creek. The glaciation didn't hit that area. Now, it did hit Snowline's area, and it scraped off the top of the deposit. So Sitka has an intact system. Snowline has a system that has been partially glaciated away. You're more familiar, and you can discuss Banyan. It's certain Victoria Gold had some bad luck because they had a breach of their
leach pad, yeah.
Yeah, which caused them to go into bankruptcy. But all those deposits are similar. And Snowline has, I think, 7.4 million ounces already defined. The management of Snowline absolutely is brilliant. I got to give the guy credit. He's done a great job to advance that company so far, so fast in 2 years. However, Sitka's got actually what should be a better deposit, and they're cashed up now, and they came out with that extraordinary hole, and they understand they have to step out and they need to drill deep. Now, they will finish drilling for this year in the next week or so, but they can actually start drilling again in January or February. I was talking when Sitka was 18, 19, 20 cents for the longest time, and it's still short of 50 cents a share now. I don't like the share structure. It's about 315 million shares, and I'm not happy with that, but there's lots of things I'm not happy with. But I think that Sitka is going to be another Snowline, and Snowline has somewhere between 7 and 8 times the market cap.
Yeah, I think Sitka is pretty compelling. They got assays pending for a bunch of holes, including at this new intrusion, the Rose Gold Belt, with VG and lots of holes. I mean, 600.
Okay, can you pronounce that?
Rose Gold Belt.
Okay, close your eyes and see if you can spell it.
RHOSGOBEL.
I think you just guessed.
Well, I mean, anyway, that's a hell of a hit. And, if you understand how these things work, they're basically like porphyries that don't have any copper. So you got 678 meters of a gram gold from surface. You've got a big intrusion. You have a big deposit. there's probably going to be a lot more holes that are what 3, 4, 500 meters with a lot of continuous gold. That's impressive, and it's holes like that that tell you that you got a potential mine on your hands, right? And you made a good point about Snowline. I mean, 7.4 million. They probably have 10 million ounces in total. Banyan's got 7 million ounces too. Who knows what Sitka has, but it's probably definitely in the millions just based upon these results. It's like we got all the gold we need in the Yukon. It's really, and it's interesting to see Newmont leave the Yukon. They're selling their coffee project, and we're going to hear about that soon. Who's going to move in and do a consolidation, a roll up of all of these gold assets in the Yukon? I mean, if a company spent a few $billions, they could acquire 40 million ounces.
I don't think they're going to be able to afford it when the majors wake up. I can't remember the company, but Newmont bought a company in eastern Nevada that did not even have a resource at the top of the market in 2011, paid $2.3 billion. So Snowline with an $800 million, $900 million market cap, that's really cheap. Sitka with $150, $200 million market cap, that's like chump change. Banyan, I'm not sure what their total market cap is, but over 7 million ounces. Those are economic deposits. Those are going to be mines. Now, let me point something out, and I've written about this with Sitka. Sitka realized that the sweet spot in their deposit was owned by Victoria Gold. And they spent months negotiating a deal on Clear Creek, and they closed the deal on the day the tailings dam collapsed. Okay, it was announced the next day. They closed it the very last day that they could have possibly done that. And that was amazing luck on their part. And this, I would not even try to pronounce the name of that project. They just announced the VG in the drill hole, but they're drilling the crap out of Clear Creek right now. And I think we're going to see a lot more 400, 500, 600 meter intercepts. So what's going to happen is the majors going to wake up. You made a very good point. The majors are actually trying to go out and pick up copper projects now. They're bored silly with gold because they're not making any money off the market valuation for gold. So they're going after copper. And I don't think that makes sense. The majors are always wrong. Okay. They're paying the most for projects at the very top. And at the bottom, projects are being given away because they're not interested. But when you have 4 major projects in one small area in the Yukon, those projects are going into production. Somebody's going to buy them, but I don't think they're going to buy them for chump change. I think it's going to cost some money.
You make some good points. I would say that nothing in the Yukon is small. These property packages are enormous, and Banyan, I was looking at theirs. Square, it's like their core property is 25 miles by 10 miles or something. I mean, they have huge land packages, but that's a good point with Sitka that you make. They managed to close that deal the morning or the day before the heap leach pad failure at Vic Gold. Stunning, stunning turn of events. I think Sitka is really onto something here. I agree with you. If there's one point of caution, it's probably the share structure and the seasonality. The seasonal, they have to shut down at the end of October. They come back in May. It's just
actually not. Where you just raised a good point. I hate to interrupt, but I'm willing to. Snowline has a real issue with seasonality.
Seasonality, yeah.
They don't have power and they don't have road access, but Sitka does not have that problem. Sitka could actually drill 12 months a year, but they need to look over the drill results and figure out where they go in 2025. So there is a difference between projects. They're not major differences, because when you're talking about 7 million ounces of economic gold at 2750 gold, that's going into production. It could be in the middle of East Bumfuck under 200 meters of snow, and it's still going into production.
Yeah, that's a good point about Sitka. I met with the management a few weeks ago, and he did say that they could drill year round, but they're going to choose not to, because it's good to have that downtime during the winter to analyze and compile and interpret, the results, and then come back the following year with a smart plan. Bob, thank you so much for your time here on this Friday afternoon. I appreciate it, and I know the viewers do as well. Cheers.
Thank you and good job.